Welcome to Voice of Faith. May this message strengthen your walk. Now for today's word from God, Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 11 through 14. Let's read Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 11 through 14 together with one voice. Be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God, failing to observe his commands, his laws, and his decrees that I am giving you this day. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, and when your herds and flocks grow large, and your silver and gold increase, and all you have is multiplied, then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Amen. We have begun a special sermon series based on the book, Dwelling in Canaan. Today is our second session. There's a difference between just reading the book and actually hearing the sermons from this series. The reason I strongly encourage you to read the book is so you can be supplied with sufficient biblical grounding and detailed explanations. For those who might struggle to grasp the core message even after reading, this service may be of help. So I hope you will take this opportunity to read the book, and through these messages, I bless you that God will open your eyes to see clearly how you should live in the wilderness and in Canaan. The overall direction of this series is to address the theme of how should we live life, and what is life really? For some, the question, what is life, might seem like a luxury. You might think, what is life? You just live it. There's even a pop song about it. But this is not just a theme for a pop song or a philosophical topic for people with too much time on their hands. Clearly knowing what life is has the power to change your entire life. The reason we fail in life is that we live without knowing exactly what life is, understanding it in a completely wrong way. That's why we live lives of failure and regret. The author of Dwelling in Canaan is a pastor who was a classmate of mine in seminary. He ministers in another country now. He has written many books, but the one that made him famous, a true bestseller, was a book about the wilderness. In that book, he presented a very powerful challenge, which is why it sold so many copies. What is life, really? Most people understand life as a process of climbing a mountain to reach the summit of success. That's why children study so hard. To get to the top, to be number one, to pass the exam, and to live a successful life. That's why we work so hard at our jobs, to get promoted and reach the top. There are countless books in the bookstore about this. Most people think life is like climbing a mountain. But in his book on the wilderness, he says that's not it. Our life is not the shape of climbing a mountain to the summit, but it is like passing through a desert. Life is like crossing a wilderness, a desert. Do you have a clear understanding of this? Think about it. When you are climbing a mountain, you can see the whole shape. From a distance, you can see, that is the mountain I will climb. So we climb towards the mountain we can see. But in a desert, you can't see the end. From the starting point, you have no idea where the end is. Which do you think your life is closer to? Can you see the end of your life? Do you have a clear grasp? This is what life is. On a mountain, there's a general path for how to climb. That's why there are hiking trails. You follow the trail, and it's even on the map. But a desert has no path. The sand is always shifting in the wind. There's only a direction, no path. Which does your life resemble? Are you living a life with a clear path like a hiking trail? Or does it feel like you are crossing a desert where you start each day with no idea how you're supposed to live, with no way to predict what will happen? When climbing a mountain, you can generally predict most things. You know what it will be like at the bottom, in the middle, and what kind of rough terrain you might face higher up. You can prepare in advance. But when crossing a desert, everything is uncertain. If you get tired while climbing a mountain, you can just come back down. But in a desert, you have to keep going. It's not a path you can just turn back on. In a desert, even if it's hard, the only answer is to keep moving forward. So, is life like climbing a mountain or crossing a desert? The book says that life is, in fact, like crossing a wilderness. Just as God had the Israelites pass through the wilderness to enter Canaan, He leads our lives through a wilderness. The book explains this with great persuasiveness and in a way that truly opens your eyes. Unfortunately, despite this, people live as if they are climbing a mountain when they are actually crossing a desert. So nothing fits. Climbing a mountain and crossing a desert are completely different things. What's important for us is to get through this wilderness properly and quickly, not to conquer a mountain summit. But because we live as if we are trying to conquer a summit, problems arise. Many Christians don't accurately understand God's plan for the wilderness. Some of you might be in a situation where your life feels like a wilderness right now. As a church, we gave an offering for the homeless today, and they are truly passing through a wilderness. It's a life where they must live by eating what God provides day by day. Some of you may feel that way, but many believers think that God leading us through a wilderness is a form of punishment. I did something wrong, so God must be punishing me. Or, because I lived that way back then, God has made me miserable like this. Or they think, God, what did I do wrong for you to give me such a hard time? Because they think of the wilderness this way, they cannot walk through it properly. Friends, the wilderness is also part of God's journey of salvation. God saved us, and then He gave us the wilderness. After the Israelites escaped from Egypt and Pharaoh's army was pursuing them, God parted the Red Sea, and they passed through on foot. Pharaoh's army followed and was drowned in the sea. The Israelites who witnessed this danced and rejoiced. And when did they do this? At the very moment they entered the wilderness. They entered the path of the wilderness with dancing and joy because it was part of the journey of salvation. The salvation God has permitted for us includes the path of the wilderness. So the wilderness is not just a path given to us as a frightening punishment from God. Once you know this, you can give thanks even in the wilderness. The Israelites' joy, their singing and dancing after crossing the Red Sea, is actually possible in the wilderness life as well, if only our spiritual eyes are opened. Because people only think, I have to get through this wilderness quickly, and ask, God, when will this hardship end? The wilderness feels longer and longer. When you become impatient, time feels longer, doesn't it? We have been going through difficulties due to the pandemic for 3 years now, and it feels very long. Because we keep thinking, this has to end soon, it has to end soon, we suffer more psychologically. But the reason God had the Israelites pass through the wilderness was not to make them suffer for no reason, but to train them in a life of walking with Him, a life of relying only on Him, looking only to Him, and obeying only Him. He pushed them into a place where there was nothing to rely on, so they would naturally look only to God. When you enter the wilderness, it's like that. He made them look only to God to wash away all the spiritual traces and the filth in their hearts from their time as slaves in Egypt, so they could learn to live by looking to God, believing in God, and obeying God. So if we just think, this is the purpose, and live that way, it's fine. But because we only pray, please just solve this hardship quickly, and ask, how long do I have to live like this? How long must I be in this difficulty? The wilderness just gets longer and longer. It was in 2017. I went on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land with some of our church members, and we had to hold a Sunday service in a certain Middle Eastern country. But in that nation, it was hard to find a suitable place for a Sunday service, not in a hotel or anywhere else. It's a non-Christian region, so arranging a place of worship was difficult. But it was Sunday, so I asked our guide, who was a believer, if there was a church nearby or a place where we could worship. After a while, he came back and said, "Pastor, what about this?" He said, "What if we hold our service in the wilderness on our way? It would be wonderful." Wow, that's a great idea. Then we don't have to worry about what others think. So we decided to hold our Sunday service in the wilderness. That Sunday morning, we left the hotel. After driving for a while, we were in the middle of a vast wilderness. A road stretched out before us. The bus stopped, and our guide said, "Pastor, let's get off here and climb that hill over there to worship." I saw a small hill nearby, so we got off the bus, and only then did I realize how difficult it is to walk in the wilderness. The hill looked close, but it was quite far, and though it was a small hill, it was quite difficult to climb. We walked for a good while into the wilderness with the church members and sat down on a slope of the hill. And as I sat there, the wilderness stretched out before my eyes. The wilderness you see from a bus on the road and the wilderness you see while sitting on a hill inside it are completely different. At that moment, God suddenly asked me a question in my heart. "In a wilderness like this, can you still believe in me?" I could vividly feel how the Israelites must have felt trying to live by faith in the wilderness. There was no way for me to get food on my own, no way to get water. If an endless wilderness like this stretched out, and over 3 million people were gathered together, they would all die within a few days. If God is alive, He feeds them. If God is not, they die. That is the wilderness. If you enter the wilderness improperly, you die. If you get lost and can't find your way, you just die there. You either become food for wild animals, or you die of thirst or hunger. So all you can say is, oh Lord, where do we go? What do we eat? What water do we drink?" I could vividly feel what the Israelites must have felt in the wilderness after the Exodus. To believe in God means to rely on God, to pray to God. I felt, so this is what faith is. This is what it means to rely on God and pray. God didn't send them to the wilderness for no reason. Through 40 years of life, with God giving them manna, bringing water from the rock, and guiding them daily with a pillar of cloud and fire, He made the Israelites into God's people. He made their belief in God a reality. Because if there is no God, you die immediately. You must realize this to pass through the wilderness. So, is there anyone among you who feels, "I am passing through such a wilderness right now"? If so, God's plan is to open your eyes of faith to live day by day, relying solely on Him. You lived through today, didn't you? Even if you have nothing, even if the place you sleep is not your own home, even if you don't know where you'll go after this service, for those people, you are truly in the wilderness right now. And you must remember, you survived today. No matter what you ate or how you got by, you made it through today. That is how the Israelites passed each day in the wilderness. It seemed impossible to survive, but they lived through one more day. Manna fell in the morning. God guided their path with a pillar of cloud and fire, and if there was no water, He made it come from a rock. That was life in the wilderness. But what is important is that our lives are not just the wilderness. There is also Canaan. So you need to know how to live in the wilderness and how to live in Canaan. They are completely different. Life in the wilderness and life in Canaan are completely different. When passing through the wilderness, the situation is hard, but on the other hand, it's a miracle every day. You wake up in the morning, go outside, and manna has fallen. It's a miracle every day. A pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. You live confirming 24 hours a day, God is with us. The miracle of water coming from a rock also happens. So if you look back on life in the wilderness, on one hand, it's unspeakably hard. But on the other hand, it's a miracle every day. The very fact that you survived a day is a miracle. In the land of Canaan, you have to farm your own land. God doesn't give manna anymore. Now you have to sow seeds, cultivate them, bear fruit, harvest, and store it in a barn. When passing through the wilderness, you'd be a fool to build a house. Why? You have to move again tomorrow. What's the point of building a house in the middle of a desert? You should quickly pitch a tent, and in the morning, take it down, pack it up, and go. If you build a house with bricks, you're done for. That was the wilderness. In the wilderness, building a house, building a barn, or accumulating wealth, you have to carry all that with you, so heavy baggage is not suitable. There's no reason to have many sets of clothes. But Canaan is different. In Canaan, you have to build a house, build a barn, store your grain, properly raise your flocks, increase your wealth, and prepare food for the next day. That is life in Canaan. The life we are living these days is just like the settled life of Canaan. Moses tells the Israelites that when they enter Canaan, they will live differently than they did in the wilderness. That's what today's reading in verses 12 and 13 is about. When you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, and when your herds and flocks grow large and your silver and gold increase, and all you have is multiplied. When you enter Canaan, you will live like that. As they were hearing these words, they were in the wilderness. How wonderful must that have sounded to them? Wow, we'll get to build houses and live there. We'll be able to accumulate wealth, and there will be abundant grain. After 40 years of eating only manna, now they would be able to farm and eat grain. It's easy to imagine them thinking how great it would be, but Moses didn't say this just to tell them how many good things would happen in Canaan. He said these things will happen, but the real point he wanted to make is in verse 14. Then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God. In the wilderness, you can't forget God. Every day, it's about manna. If God doesn't give it, you starve. But in Canaan, you live by farming. You can store up rice or flour. You always have enough food for a few days. So you don't need to look to God every day. You forget Him. You build a house and live there. You don't necessarily need a pillar of cloud and fire. Life in Canaan is dangerous. What Moses is trying to say is, when you go to Canaan, you will build houses, gather wealth, become prosperous, and have more ease than in the wilderness. But I am concerned that because of this, you will forget the Lord your God. In verse 17, he says, you may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. And it's easy to think that way. Who farmed the land? I did, because you actually did the farming. So, was the grain a gift from God, or something you harvested through your own farming? This is where the confusion begins. I farmed it and harvested it. You forget that God gave the sunlight and the rain, allowing you to farm. I built this house with my own hands. This danger arises in Canaan. Life in the wilderness is hard, but the evidence of God's work is always so clear. But in Canaan, life is completely different, and this is the danger. You forget God. God's work is not so clearly realized. So there is a concern that you will leave God. And it happened just as Moses had worried and prophesied. The Israelites entered Canaan, forgot God, fell into the idolatry of the land, and sinned against God. And then they were cast out into the wilderness again. They couldn't live in Canaan and were driven out. This didn't just happen to the Israelites. Rome, after becoming a Christian nation, experienced the same thing. The medieval Roman Catholic Church repeated the same pattern, as did the European churches. And now the church in our own nation is facing a similar crisis. Because we have not lived properly in Canaan, we have fallen into a situation where we are being driven back into the wilderness. So we must learn how to live in the wilderness and how to live in Canaan. Because we don't know this properly, we don't live according to God's plan. The Israelites fell into idolatry in Canaan because the Canaanites believed that the god Baal was the one who made the crops grow. When the Israelites entered Canaan, they saw the people farming, but they didn't know how to farm themselves because they had only passed through the wilderness. They learned by watching the Canaanites. And the Canaanites all said, "You must worship Baal to have a good harvest." So subtly, because they needed a good harvest, the Israelites began to worship Baal. And they fell into terrible idolatry. In a world where everyone believes you have to worship Baal for a good harvest, it is incredibly difficult to live saying, "I will not worship idols." This is our problem. The world we live in is a world that worships money. Money is number one. Money is the most powerful. But for us who believe in Jesus, it is different. God is our God. Money is not our God. We do not live by the greed for money. But as we live in this world, even while attending church and believing in Jesus, we have become just like the people of the world, completely captivated by money. The Israelites worshiping Baal in Canaan is precisely our problem. We live in this world, we say we believe in Jesus, but our hearts are filled with thoughts, greed, and worries about money. This is typical evidence that we have not properly understood how to live in Canaan. That's why, even though we believe in Jesus, we cannot live a life where God's plan is fulfilled. God didn't have the Israelites enter Canaan because it was a holy land. Canaan was a land full of great sin. The 7 Canaanite tribes lived in unspeakable sin. So God had the Israelites enter that land to remove the sin, and He commanded them to completely destroy the inhabitants of Canaan, to cleanse the land from sin. But the Israelites did not completely destroy the Canaanites. They made them slaves and tried to benefit from being friendly with them. And in the end, they were absorbed by their culture, adopted their religion, and became just as spiritually corrupt as the Canaanite people. In the end, God had Israel destroyed as well, taken captive to Babylon. So just entering Canaan is not the goal. You shouldn't just pray, "Lord, the wilderness is so hard. Please let me enter Canaan quickly." You must remember that Canaan is even more dangerous than the wilderness if you don't rely completely on God. If you don't live by relying on and looking to God, you will go back to the wilderness life. The world we live in today is becoming a world even more wicked than Canaan. That is a very frightening thing. We must really keep our wits about us. The reason I wanted to do this sermon series based on the book Dwelling in Canaan is because I felt we need to clearly study and learn about what it means to live as a believer in this day and age. Many temptations are coming our way. You have probably had hard times in your life. Times when you went to early morning prayer, all-night prayer, when you couldn't sleep at home. So you prayed all night, fasted, and clung to God. The prayers you prayed with such a desperate heart back then, are you still praying them now? Are you praying with that kind of heart? If you've forgotten, if you think, "I prayed like that when I was in the wilderness, but now life is a bit more comfortable. I have food for a few days at home. It's okay if God doesn't do something for me right away." If you have a place to live, food to eat, some money saved up, and some people you know, then your heart is no longer desperate before God. This is the crisis of entering the land of Canaan. It's what Moses worried about. When you enter Canaan, you will forget God. You will no longer have the heart you had in the wilderness. Lord, I need you with me every moment. Our church also had a time when it was passing through the wilderness. Some of you were here during that time, and some of you know nothing of it. As I have pastored this church through the process of finishing the sanctuary construction and paying off the enormous debt, I feel like we truly went through a wilderness. After the Sunday service ended, I couldn't go home. I couldn't leave until the elder who was the chairman of the finance committee gave me his report. What report did I need to hear? Pastor, we have received enough offering to pay the interest. After counting all the offering, he had to tell me if we could pay the enormous interest on our debt. As I recall now, we had to pay about 40 million won every month. It was an agonizing wait. When the finance elder would say, "The offering came in, so the church can continue for another week," I would say, "Thank you," and go home. That's how you live in the wilderness. You solve that day's food problem that day. There's no capacity to save up. You live day by the grace of the Lord. Looking back on those years, I wonder how we ever did it. But our church had such a time. What I'm thankful for is that even while going through that, when a sister church in another country asked for prayer and support to secure a sanctuary, though we had nothing to give, when the situation became desperate, God gave us the faith to take on more debt. We already had so much, but we took on more debt to send to that church for their sanctuary. We have that testimony. How could we do that? We believed that we had to walk the path that pleases God for Him to keep us alive. We truly believed that God was in a position to keep us alive or let us die. We thought, the only way we can survive is if God works, so we must do what pleases Him. Thinking about it now, it's hard to understand. Not a single elder was opposed. In fact, when I said I felt this in prayer, all the elders thought it was a wonderful idea. They said, "How did you think of such a great thing, Pastor? Let's take on more debt and send it." But the problem was that the construction company that held our sanctuary as collateral wouldn't agree. We had to get an additional loan from the bank, and we needed the construction company's consent. The elders who went to them were told, "Are you crazy? Are you in any position to be worrying about another church right now? If you have that money, pay us back." That was our situation. We endured all this. Only obedience, only faith, only the Lord. Because it was so difficult, things became very clear. Just believe in the Lord, do what pleases Him, and obey only Him. We're going to die anyway, so we might as well die trying to do something good. We even developed that kind of resolve. But now we have clearly passed the wilderness. I don't have to wait for a report from the finance department after Sunday service to go home. We are living in Canaan. We have saved up, built an education building, and our church's financial situation is such that we can say, God has truly blessed us. Now is our Canaan. But we must know that because of this, we are in a more dangerous situation. Now that we have entered Canaan, it is more dangerous than when we were in the wilderness. Why? Because we can forget God. Before, we offered an obedience that was unbelievable, but now, because we think we have something, we might not be able to obey God so thoroughly. That's why we decided to observe a Church Love Sunday on the last week of February. It's to remember the time when our church was in a crisis of survival. Our church had that difficult time. At that time, God was truly with us and delivered us. We must not forget that. When you're in the wilderness, it seems like everyone has great faith. You believe with a life or death intensity. But real faith is revealed after you enter Canaan. When you are well off, when you have some ease, do you still remember the Lord? Do you still live by believing only in the Lord and doing as He pleases? That is the test. In Canaan, God doesn't perform miraculous works as frequently as he did in the wilderness. Our situation has improved that much. But it's not that God is no longer with us. God is always with us, the same in the wilderness and in Canaan. But what God wants is that even in Canaan, we would look to him just as we did in the wilderness. Then this land of Canaan will be used more preciously for the kingdom of God. In the wilderness, survival itself is the issue, so there is no capacity to do God's work. Just getting through the day is a desperate struggle. But in Canaan, you now have the capacity to do God's work. Look to God. Look to God in Canaan just as you did in the wilderness. God brought us into Canaan because he has a work for us to do. But now that we have houses, food, and some money saved up, if we live with less faith than we had in the wilderness, God will take it all away again and send us back out to the wilderness to train us to look only to him. You must not think of Canaan as just a prosperous place where difficulties are gone. You shouldn't just think of it as, God, I'm so tired right now. Please solve this difficulty quickly. Canaan is by no means just a prosperous, comfortable, and good place. As I said last time, Egypt and Ur were much better than Canaan, if you are only talking about comfort and good living. There are many places in this world that dazzle our eyes, places that seem so good, so expensive. But what then is Canaan? It is the place where God has designated for you to go. Ah, God has led me this far. I prayed, I worshiped, I tried to live by the word, and now I am here. Then this is Canaan, even if you are disappointed. Abraham was like that. He followed God in faith and came to Hebron, a place far inferior to where he had lived. A famine struck, and he fled to Egypt, intending to live there because it was so much more prosperous. We can be in a place where God has led us, but which is not to our liking. At that time, you must discern correctly. If God has led me here, then this is my Canaan. In the book I mentioned, on page 57, there is this passage. The place where God leads us, the place where God sends us, wherever that may be, that is our Canaan. If we are in the place where God has sent us, we are already in Canaan. You know whether you are in Canaan or not. You will know when you pray today. God, am I in Canaan right now? You have prayed, you have obeyed the word, you have believed in God, and now you are living here. Ah, God has led me here to my Canaan. There is a missionary who serves a seminary in another country. In the mission report he sent this time, he wrote these exact words. Let me read it to you. It has been 712 days since we came here. This is our family's Canaan, the place to which he has newly called us. The reason Canaan is better than Egypt is not because it is a more prosperous and fertile land, flowing with milk and honey. In Canaan, too, the wilderness still unfolds. We have to clear the land ourselves, and we have to labor to settle. When our family left our beloved home country and re-entered the mission field, it was a great challenge not only for me but also for my wife and children. My wife and I are learning our 5th new language here. The words just don't stick anymore. But we have to learn the language to live in this land. For our children, every day at school is a battle in their hearts. Even if they prepare for their studies, it is overwhelming to keep up with the other children. And it is not easy to make new friends because their backgrounds and cultures are different. It is clear that we have entered the Canaan the Lord permitted for us, but we are learning that it is not the ideal Canaan we dreamed of before we came. So every day, we hold a family worship service, share our hearts, and hold on to the Lord's will and heart. The reason Canaan is better than Egypt is that we can experience the Lord's presence every day. It is a land where we experience God's presence and that He is always with us. During worship, there are times when the children share the hard things and the hurts of their day and shed tears. My wife and I also share the difficulties of our new challenges, get upset, and feel frustrated by our lack of stamina. At such times, all we can do is entrust it to the Lord. We ask that the Lord, who knows, would hear us, and we pray that the Lord's grace would overflow in our weakness, and every time we feel the Lord's comfort in a marvelous way, and we realize the Lord's encouragement in an amazing way. So we are thankful. The greatest blessing is to experience every day that the Lord is surely with us. The children's hearts are still not completely at ease, but they too are learning to entrust it to the Lord. There are many difficulties in our ministry amid the pandemic, but even that becomes a reason for thanks and obedience. This is the blessing of Canaan that we have come to realize. Please pray that our family will adapt better to our life here and enjoy that blessing to the fullest. This is the secret of the life of a saint living in Canaan. Then God will surely accomplish a work in the land of Canaan that is completely new and different from the work he did in the wilderness. He was with them in the wilderness, and he is with them in Canaan, but his style is different. In the wilderness, he worked through manna, a pillar of cloud and fire, and water from a rock. In the land of Canaan, he uses us in amazing ways for his kingdom and his glory. The key is to look to the Lord. To live properly in the land of Canaan by looking to the Lord, you have to look to him even more than you did in the wilderness. That is why we write the Walking with Jesus diary 24 hours a day, meditate on the Bible, consistently pray for an hour, and try to maintain spiritual unity among believers through our small groups. This is the life of a saint living in Canaan. Then this land of Canaan becomes a place of mission. It's different from the wilderness, which was just a land of survival. I bless you that you will truly live that way. When I was holding that service in the wilderness, the Lord asked me, "Can you live by looking only to me, just as you do in this wilderness?" As I was preparing for the service, my heart was filled with a longing I could hardly believe was my own. Lord, it would be good to live even as a desert monk in this wilderness, looking only at you. Here, I will truly look only at you. In my home country, I would look at the Lord and then not look and get confused. But when I entered the wilderness, it became so clear that I would look only at the Lord. But God didn't have me enter a desert monastery. He told me, "When you return to your country, you must never forget this feeling." When I return, I have people I know, a familiar culture, church members, a comfortable house to sleep in, elders and associate pastors who support me. Amidst all this, I can forget God, even while serving the church diligently. But if I forget the heart I had in the wilderness, of looking at him like that, then that Canaan is no longer a Canaan of blessing. So I shared that story in my sermon to those who were on the pilgrimage with me. When we return to our home country, that will be our real wilderness. It is a more frightening place than this desert. Now we must truly live by looking only to the Lord. Let's look to the Lord 24 hours a day. Let's write in our diaries every day. All these practices came from that experience. Now some of you may be passing through a wilderness, in a desperate situation where God must feed and clothe you today. And some of you may not be in that situation. You have food for a few days. You may already be living in the land of Canaan. But before the Word of God, whether you are passing through the wilderness or living in Canaan, I bless you that you will clearly realize what it means to live well before God